kindly just post, say hello in the chat. That is a nice way of just saying hello to each other and so on. But other than that, I would also ask you to put questions and keep questions coming as we go along in the chat. My name is Margrethe, and I am a member of the AfricaLics Secretariat, and I'm based in Copenhagen, coordinating the AfricaLics Visiting Fellowship Program from here. I work very closely with Pamela, you need to mute yourself. I work very closely with Rebecca and Anne Kingiri and others in the Secretariat. The seminar today is intended to focus on how we can, within the AfricaLics community, advance discussions about gender and innovation. And to that end, we have a row of distinguished presenters. So I would like, without much further ado, to give the floor to Dr. Anne Kingiri, who is the Secretary General of AfricaLics and also a senior researcher at the African Center for Technology Studies in Nairobi. In the Secretariat, we are very excited to have this conversation today with you all, mainly because gender was identified very early on in the history of AfricaLics as a neglected area, the intersections between gender and innovation. And that's one reason why we have been putting it on the agenda for now. I remember Susan Cousins, who is one of our speakers today, also participating in a seminar we had in GlobalX, the GlobalX conference in Ghana a couple of years ago. So there are different sessions where we've been trying to increase the attention to this issue. So we are excited about having this session.
Margrethe, if you allow me, is to welcome everybody to this webinar. I think I need to do that officially to welcome everybody to this webinar. We are very, very excited. I cannot see who is with us, but I'm sure we are many. I do know that there are some people who are actually not members of the network. So welcome everybody to this webinar. It's one of the many series that we've been holding for the year. And I think this particular one has attracted a lot of attention. So welcome everybody who has joined us. So mine is just to give a small presentation on what has AfricaLics been doing in terms of advancing the discussion on this particular topic. And this is what I'm going to be doing. I will just introduce, because I'm the first speaker, and then I'll go straight to telling us what we have been doing as a network to enhance the gender and inclusivity theme in relation to innovation. And then I'll conclude with some remarks. As an introduction, I think the question we want to ask, why gender and innovation? And I think we are all aware that the topic of gender in relation to development debates is actually not new. And I think it dates back to 1970s. And for us who have been reading stuff on gender and women, we are aware of this book by Esther Bosrop, Women in Economic Development. Perhaps it dates even further beyond 1970. But I think from 1970, that's when the discussions about women and development actually kind of took traction. There has been a number of approaches to gender that have been evolving over the years. Or of course, from the time of Esther Bosrop, there was innovation and development in thinking, which actually moved on to women and development. And then from there, it moved to gender and development. And now we are in gender and innovation. I'm giving it an acronym. Perhaps that is going to take prominence from now henceforth. But you can see the developments, the approaches, the thinking around gender, how they have been evolving over the years. It's a long discussion. There's a lot of materials which have been written around that. But we see a shift in terms of the focus from women and development to gender and development. And gender and development approach actually, it pays attention to something which is very, very crucial when we are discussing about gender. the issues of social relation and construction of gender, and they're paying attention to the assignment of specific roles that both men and women play. So you can see that shift, which was very, very significant. And it has actually informed the discussions to date. But we do not want to forget that we are now in the era of SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, which actually calls for the aspect of inclusivity. And I know Susan is going to talk about this. And I think in many of the SDGs, the concept of inclusivity or inclusion is actually taken care of. It is there, you can see it across the different SDGs. But it focuses much more on trying to get everybody along in terms of development. Whether you are talking about the poor economies, whether you are talking about emerging economies, but also there is the focus on the issue of focusing on those who are socially disadvantaged, the women, the youth, girls, children, persons with disability, among others. And you can see that that component is actually eliciting, much more discussion in terms of inclusivity, who is to be included in development and who is to be included in innovation. Susan is going to be talking more about that. And where we are now and our focus for today is gender and innovation. Whether you are talking about it in terms of the discussions or debates which are going on, whether it is research or education or training, capacity building, this particular theme is becoming important. But we also want to note that the issues of gender has also been interrogated from, a sectoral perspective, organizational perspective. There's a lot of research, there's a lot of materials around gender and energy, for instance, gender and agriculture, gender and education, health. So much has been done around that particular topic. So we cannot ignore the fact that there's a lot going on around this particular topic of our interest today. But why gender and innovation? I think we are now aware, and it's actually accepted now, that innovation is a key driver of social and economic development. If you look at the policy milestones within the continent, for instance, globally, even within nations, you can see that there are some elements of innovation. There are actually pro-innovation policies, pro-STI policies. And therefore, innovation we cannot ignore is becoming increasingly important in informing what all the nations are doing, within the continent and within the globe. But there's also now some understanding that gender consideration in innovation is very, very positive in terms of contributing positively to innovation processes. So we cannot actually ignore gender consideration when we are talking about innovation processes. But sadly, gender research has ignored the innovation component. Perhaps there are many, many reasons why this is happening, but one of the reasons could actually be linked to issues of capacity. Capacity of researchers to be able to undertake relevant research in this area, conceptually and theoretically. Maybe that is one of the key reasons. And the reason why AfricaLics is actually trying to address this particular gap, the gap that relates to capacity. But having said that, if we look at the gender and innovation studies, whether it is research, capacity building, whichever area you're looking at, we want to understand that gender and innovation should not be just, looking at numbers. It is not just about participation of women, men, or any other group that may be socially disadvantaged. It is much more than that. It actually calls for a holistic and well-thought approach to gender and innovation, which is actually very key for the aspect of inclusivity, issues of economic development, as well as transformation. So we cannot ignore the fact that we need to look at gender and innovation from a holistic perspective. But it also calls for investigation of the innovation systems and see what are the gaps in terms of gender, to see what are the gaps and try to reconfigure those systems to align them to the gender needs as well as the gender gaps. But more important, it calls for what I perceive here to be gender learning, which is much more than gender mainstreaming. It's much more than gender analysis, gender learning, and system empowerment or system capacity building, in recognition of the fact that whoever is socially disadvantaged, whether it is a woman, whether it is persons with a disability, they actually fit within a system. And you need to look at their issues in terms of the system within which they belong to. So in terms of addressing the issues, then you address the issues that relates to the system, rather than the issue of women or the issue of whoever is socially disadvantaged. That is what I'm calling gender learning, as well as system empowerment or system capacity building. So coming to AfricaLics and what we have been doing in terms of building this particular research theme, and particularly building the capacity of scholars within Africa to undertake research in gender and innovation, I would want maybe to assume that there are people who are not from AfricaLics here, and they do not actually know what is AfricaLics. They don't know what this network is doing. But just to briefly mention who we are as a network, we are the African chapter of a global network on economics of learning, innovation and competence building systems. It's called AfricaLics, which is a worldwide research network of scholars who are social scientists, economists, who are, brought together in terms of your conviction around innovation and competence building, and the fact that it can actually contribute to economic, sustainable, and inclusive development. This is a network which was established in 2002, but AfricaLics, which is actually the African chapter of that global network, it was established in 2012. Right now, it has over 6.1 active members who are, they span across the globe, but majority of them are actually within Africa. The vision of AfricaLics is basically to see African countries developing and utilizing high quality research that is actually conducted by the African researchers themselves to be able to inform, policy decisions that are to be made with regards to the use of STI, or science, technology, and innovation, for social and economic development that is targeting different stakeholders, civil society, or the different communities of practice. That is basically the vision of AfricaLics as a network. But our efforts are informed by, the research agenda for the network. The research agenda that was defined in 2012, and that particular, the meeting which agreed in terms of formation of an African chapter of AfricaLics, it was informed by what they were perceiving to be 9 neglected thematic research areas. There were 9 that particular time, and out of those 9, one of the thematic areas was actually gender in Africa's innovation system. And that has actually informed the AfricaLics research agenda to date. But over the years, AfricaLics research agenda has been shifting, it has been changing, and you can see to date, there has been quite some change in terms of focus in research. And one thing we can notice that the focus on gender has actually remained dominant. But right now, it is embedded within the broader theme on inclusive innovation and development. So this particular theme has continued to remain, predominant within AfricaLics, and the reason why we would want to actually continue, building capacity around it. Coming to the research capacity activities and AfricaLics, these particular activities have been funded by SIDA, and I'm going to speak about our efforts which are around this research capacity building project, which is aimed at building innovation research capacity for Africa's development with the aim of building at critical, yes? Yes?
Maybe we have to move a little bit, not spend too much time on this. I realize it's important, but maybe we need to move a little bit ahead.
yeah, of course, I'm coming to the end. Yeah, so these particular activities have been informing AfricaLics in terms of, trying to target, the capacity around this particular theme. And if you look at the activities, particularly the academies, we have tried to increase the number of female participation within the academies. With up to date, we have trained 171 PhD students, and 62 of them have been female, and compared to 109 on 109 male students of the period since 2012. In terms of research conferences, we have trained 460 scholars, or rather the participation has been 460. And out of these, 133 have been actually female. So you can actually see we have had a targeted effort to increase the number of female participation in our capacity building activities. And when it comes to visiting fellows program and the postdoc, we have had 21 PhD students, and out of these, 9 have been female out of 12 male. So you can actually see the effort that AfricaLics has made to increase the number of female scholars within Africa. And within the mentorship program, again, we have having 13 PhD students, and out of these, 9 are actually females. So we have had a deliberate effort in terms of increasing, the participation of female researchers in this particular field within AfricaLics. And in terms of conferences, you can see that we have aimed at making sure that these thematic areas remain, dominant in our conferences. And in 2015, we made sure that there was a session of focusing on gender and innovation, where 4 papers were presented during that particular session. Then in 2017, again, there was a session which was focusing on gender analysis of technological innovation and enabling environment. And in 2019, again, there was another session which was focusing on this particular topic. So in terms of future plans, and this is my last slide, Magreda, we are actually going to continue, dedicating our efforts towards, promoting this particular thematic area, because it is key for Africa, as well as promoting the number of female researchers in this field through our activities, research capacity building activities, but also encourage our upcoming AfricaLics hubs, particularly AfricaLics, to consider developing this thematic area, whether it is through research projects or through thematic chairs. We want to do that, and we want to encourage our AfricaLics hubs to actually engage in this particular topic, but also encouraging collaborative initiatives and collaborative partnerships within AfricaLics and outside AfricaLics. And during the discussion, I'm sure we are going to share more ideas about how we can develop this particular topic, as well as increase the number of female researchers in this field. Thank you, Magreda. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Anne, and sorry for rushing you a bit. That was a great introduction, I thought, to how we have been dealing with the gender issues and gender and innovation stuff in AfricaLics so far. I like in particular your view that gender is not just about ticking boxes and about numbers, but also about challenging the deeper concepts and ways of thinking about innovation. So I think that's where we have big challenges ahead. And without much further ado, I would like to give the floor now to Susan Cousins, who is a member of the AfricaLics Scientific Board, and also, of course, a professor emerita from the Georgia Tech University in the US. Susan, we are excited to have you on board. Thanks very much for taking time to give a presentation today. And we are looking forward to your presentation as well. Meanwhile, if anybody has questions to Anne, can I please ask them to post questions in the chat so that we can get back to these after the presentations? I hope it's okay that we do it like this, because otherwise it's difficult to manage the time. Yeah? Thank you very much, everybody. And over to you, Susan.
Okay, thank you, Margreta. Can everyone see my slides at this point?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yes. Excellent. Well, I want to thank the organizers very much for inviting me to participate. As Margareta mentioned, they knew that this topic is very close to my heart, even though I don't do gender studies per se, but I have been a woman in a male-dominated area, this science, technology, and innovation policy area for quite a long time, and have always really tried to look for opportunities for women and make sure that women get recognized for what they do there. I did not take gender explicitly and systematically into account in my research agenda until I started exploring with my students and my colleagues the connections between STI policies and global inequalities. So what I wanted to do with you today, actually, if I can get this slide to change, there we go, is actually share a little of the framework that we've used in that analysis with an emphasis on the gender issue in it, and have that lead to a set of questions that we might be able to explore together in AfricaLics and in GlobalIcs more broadly. So I'm going to say a few things very quickly about what global inequalities are and the shape of them, and then give you a couple dimensions of the framework that we've been using to think through the question of how can we actually use these policies to reduce inequalities. Most of what they do is increase inequalities unless they're specifically designed to do otherwise. So I'll give you a little list, at least, of some of the ways that that innovation policies can be used to reduce the inequalities, and then walk through the matrix of analytic categories and see what we find there and what I've seen in Africa. So global inequality is very steep. I'm sure I don't need to tell you all about this. There are a few rich people and there are a whole lot of poor people out there in the world. For people who know Gini indexes, the global Gini index at household level is about 0.7, which is really, really high. And it turns out that that on the one hand, national governments can do some things that we're all familiar with to try to reduce those inequalities within countries. They do income transfers and use their tax policies and all kinds of things. But the big influence, which is what this graph shows, is actually the differences in the levels of prosperity across countries. So 85% of that variance among households is due to the fact that there are rich countries and there are poor countries, and that controls how much the decision makers, the policy makers, have to move around in redistribution. And that inequality between countries is very connected to STI policies, to science, technology, and innovation. This graph just shows historically how the different changes in mode of production driven by new technologies that are being introduced have only widened the gap between the countries that are at the forefront of that activity and those that have been off on the periphery of the global economy, right into the current era, which Europeans call Industry 4.0. It has all the dynamics to widen that gap even further. And what's pushing all this forward now in the global north are these science, technology, and innovation policies. They are a contributing factor to this gap that's growing. So as we've taken on this hard task of how do we use those policies to actually reduce inequalities, we have had to adopt a few categories in our analysis. One is the dimensions of inequalities themselves. We adopted this terminology of vertical and horizontal inequalities from Frances Stewart, who is a very distinguished development scholar. The vertical dimension of inequality we can think of as the rich-poor dimension. It makes a big difference for how you live, whether you're a family with a lot of income and a lot of wealth, or whether you're very, very poor. And so health and education tend to get associated with that dimension. But then there are also these horizontal inequalities between groups that we define culturally and that get assigned to advantaged or disadvantaged positions. And I always use gender as the first example of this. People might not think of gender as culturally defined, but we all know it means different things in different places in the world. Being a woman means different things. Being a man means different things in different cultures. Then the other set of horizontal groups that you're all really aware of that are advantaged and disadvantaged. Sometimes they're called races. In South Africa, Black and white differences. In the US, Black and white differences are linked to that cultural definition. So both of those dimensions are important because there are rich people in the disadvantaged groups and poor people. The other set of categories that we need is what do we mean by STI policies? There are different flavors of those. Some of them deal with people and whether we've got the right people to do what we want to do in the system. Some of them deal with whether we have the right knowledge. Some of them deal with encouragement for doing new things in new ways, new products and services, mostly in the private sector, but this can also be aimed at public sector innovation. And finally, there's a set of regulatory policies that have really strong technological and scientific components, and they lay the ground rules. So those are some of the categories that we've had to sort out for ourselves in order to be able to think through this issue. I just want to mention briefly some of the kinds of solutions to the problem, some of the tools that the whole scholarly community has identified, including the suite of things that are called inclusive innovation, particularly bottom-up innovation that happens in contexts of scarcity. And then the different ways that the conventional STI policy tools can be used. They can either be aimed at households at the bottom of the income scale, that's pro-poor. The egalitarian ones are trying to reduce those horizontal inequalities. And then there's a set that do something I call equalizing, which is really creating new kinds of opportunities in the economy. I'm not going to do anything else with this list, but I wanted to let you know that it's out there. So let's just take the vertical inequalities and gender as one horizontal inequality and think through what's happening in those STI policy categories. In the human resource area, both in the North and in the South, science education is the big theme. How can we recruit young people to consider science and engineering careers, and how can we get them through all the levels of education that they need to get through to move into those careers? And everywhere that I've seen this work going on, there's a lot of attention to getting girls into science and engineering and keeping them in science and engineering. So I didn't even bother to go out and look and see whether there are African women scientists and engineers involved in this movement, because I'm sure that there are. There's a big international movement to get women into science and engineering, and it's very well embedded in the UN system. The other thing that's exciting actually is having women emerge as leaders in science and technology intensive government activities. And I've got examples of two African women who've been in those kinds of roles here in the slide. The top one is Lydia Brito, who was the first Minister of Science and Technology in Mozambique after the Civil War, and is now with the UNESCO system. And then the bottom picture is Naledi Pandor, who, as I understand, has been in and out of being Minister for the Department of Science and Technology in South Africa twice. Rumor has it that when she arrived the first time, the first question she asked was, what is this department doing to address poverty in South Africa? So she linked the two columns that we have here in a very powerful way, because she's a central figure in the ANC. So those are just examples, but it's very exciting to see. In the North, by the way, in terms of attention that's given to the inequalities generally, probably 90% of that attention goes right into that horizontal dimension in the human resource area, into recruiting a more diverse science and engineering workforce. And what we'll see in the other places is that doesn't do the whole trick. That doesn't solve the whole problem. In terms of research agenda, the question is whose questions are getting studied? Where is new knowledge being produced in relation to what problems? And there's a lot of literature on the gaps between global challenges and the research agenda on an international, on a world kind of basis. What I've seen in South Africa in particular is that there's attention to the need to balance the needs of industry to get that economy going and create the prosperity, and doing things that are specifically pro-poor, that are aimed at making lives better for people at the bottom of the income scale. And I've also seen attention to women's issues in the research agenda in the countries where I've done research also, which is Mozambique and South Africa. The HPV vaccine is addressing a major cause of death for women in many parts of Africa. And all the work on water and access to water at household level is intrinsically a gender issue, because women, where the water is not brought to households in pipes, women carry it and girls carry it. And that's just a fact the world over. The innovation policy area in the North is very oriented to big firms or to little entrepreneurial startup firms, to emerging technologies, to the technological frontier and that sort of thing. So it's a big shock for innovation policy to arrive in the global South and find out that huge swaths of employment are in the informal sector, and innovation there needs attention and is really important, but it hasn't gotten attention in the North. But in the last 10 years, there's been increasing attention to innovation in the informal sectors, including a lot of this has gone on in Africa collaboratively across countries. When Judith Suits and I first did a review for an international research agency on innovation in informal sectors, we looked really hard for examples of women as informal innovators, and we only found 2. And that's it in the review. So I was really delighted when Erica Kramer-Ambula's co-edited book came out on innovation in the informal economy, to see the chapter with the case study on the home and personal care products industry, where over half of the enterprises were owned by women. So there's a really kind of ripe area there, figuring out what the conditions are that encourage that. The regulatory sphere in the North, there's a whole feminist branch of technology assessment. The gender lens is brought in as a pretty standard thing, even in the discussion now of the ethics of artificial intelligence. Gender biases are pretty much automatically brought in by the fact that there are feminists out there and making sure that the gender lens stays there. I know a lot less about that in the African context, and I haven't seen that. So again, this blank spot down there is actually a potential research agenda area. So all that exploration actually leads to a whole set of questions we could be studying together in the African context about human resources, whether poor households really are able to send their talented students into science and engineering careers, whether they are supported and seeing women's issues, the issues that actually challenge women in their everyday lives, are those built into the research agenda? Are leaders expected to be building those in? In the innovation area, are there actually conditions that are the conditions right for bottom-up kinds of innovations, including the ones that women are very responsible for? Because I'm convinced there are a lot of women innovators out there, they just don't get seen in that way. And then in the regulatory sphere, there's a lot of room to think about, are we thinking about differential risks, health and safety risks for men and women? And are we thinking about where the costs of innovation are being distributed? Are they being borne disproportionately by small producers? So there's a lot of research out there that we could work on together, and I'm glad to have a chance to talk to you about some of it. I hope I've given you some things to think about, and I really appreciate your attention this morning.
Thank you for talking about these different issues. I think in particular your take on or the emphasis you make on the interactions or the intersections between different ways of being disadvantaged, as Anne Kingiri was also commenting at, is very crucial here. So there were a couple of questions that were posed, and I think we could maybe I could ask you to comment on those two before we take the next presentation. Would that be okay?
Fine with me.
Yeah, so one was is from Oluseye in Nigeria, and thanks a lot. Well, you're actually in South Africa now. Your question was about innovation often being measured at a firm level, but gender is often measured, or gender inequalities are often measured at an individual level. So what would be useful indicators that we could think of to better measure the gender content in innovation? And most likely, Susan, you might not have answers, complete answers, but I think it's good to get the question out here now, because then people can maybe think about it. But do you have anything immediate to say?
Well, at firm level, there's a lot of attention again to women leadership. And it's kind of reflected in the informal observations of whether women own the small informal firms, but there's even attention at to leadership in big technology-based firms. The problem with, and it's not a problem really, it's just a limited perspective. It's the women in science and engineering perspective that doesn't take the question of what technologies are being developed, whose problems are being addressed into account. Are there indicators of gender content in technologies being developed and in the research agenda? Not quantitative ones. It takes a lot of dialogue and discussion, I think, but it takes a gender lens. I like the UN phrase of the gender lens, because what that means is you need to look at everything, not just as though all human beings had the same experience on the face of the earth, but really take into account those specificities, including gender specificities at the different levels, at different places on the vertical dimension. Because the big danger with the women in science perspective is that those women aren't poor anymore when they get there. And some of them may never have been poor. And so they are not necessarily the right carriers of what's affecting poor women. And women are overrepresented among the world's poor. Okay, I'll stop.
But maybe there are also indicators, Oluseye, like access to mobile phones, which is a technology that's basically a network technology that's now revolutionizing almost the way in which people can interact in African countries. So Oluseye, I don't know, did you have anything yourself in mind? Do you want to just quickly say something? Oluseye, are you there?
Maybe I can say something before we get what he has in mind. I think his question is very important, and I think it's coming at the right time, because we are actually opening a conversation on where do we go from here. And the issue of how do we address the methodological approach to some of these issues is something that we need to discuss. But having said that, I want to say that I don't think we do have an indicator, just like the way we do not have STI indicators for many things. They are being developed now. So you can imagine in terms of gender and innovation, I don't think we do have any indicators that we can argue can be used to actually measure, gender in innovation. But I think we can draw lessons from some of the work that has been done across sectors. And I want to point Jegende to a lot of work that has been done around gender and renewable energies, technological innovations. And the frameworks which have been developed, I think, have been informed by the gender goal. What is the goal in terms of, what is the gender goal, the focus? What is the gender goal in terms of focus? And if it is gender empowerment or women empowerment, then the indicators for measuring that are developed, and aligned to the focus in terms of empowerment, whether it is increasing access of credit for women, whether it is supporting, setting up of, social groups to support women entrepreneurs, such particular, indicators have informed the framework for gender analysis. If it comes to whether you are looking at the issue of health and the renewable energies, the impact of renewable energy technologies on women's health, then the indicators then will be, pegged to, addressing the issue of health. Or if it is in decision making, then that then has to be informed by, do you want to increase the number of women who should be involved in decision making around policies on renewable energy? So I think indicators could actually be informed by the focus in terms of sector and also in terms of the gender goal. I think this is what I've seen in agriculture and also in energy. But I think this is a discussion we need to be to have within AfricaLics.
It links up very well with Olivia's question about how to balance the macro and the micro issues in studies on gender and innovation, I think. So, and maybe not just micro and macro, but also the meso level, because all the institutions are also important, and who are actually making the decisions at that level, as Anne was alluding to. So, and I would also urge people to have a look at exactly at the indicators for the SDGs, which Anne was, or I think it was Susan maybe making a reference to those. There's a lot of ongoing work right now to try to identify indicators that relate to the different SDGs. And of course, when talking about gender and innovation, they also link. This issue links up very closely to the different fields that are covered by the different SDGs. Okay, so thank you very much, Susan, for kicking off this discussion and so on. I'd like to now turn to Pamela. Pamela Mbredi, who is a former or an alumni of the AfricaLics PhD Visiting Fellowship Program. She is also now a postdoctoral at the two universities, including University of Johannesburg and Technical University in Kenya. So,
yeah, so I'm going to be discussing the current research I'm undertaking for my postdoc under Erica's supervision. And this postdoc study, I'm looking at gender and capability building for transformative innovation within the fourth industrial revolution sector, specifically in Africa. And I'll be taking a comparative study of women entrepreneurs dealing, who are currently working in high technology hubs in South Africa and in Kenya. I had hoped that by the time we were having these discussions and have undertaken data collection and gotten findings that I could discuss, but there's been a delay because of the COVID issues. So right now, what I'll be discussing is what are the issues arising, what I'm coming across as I do my literature review towards data collection. And so as introduction, basically what we are finding out is that the rate of female entrepreneurship has increased tremendously in recent years. For example, and this is all over the world, but more so in Africa. For example, the MasterCard Index of Women Entrepreneurs indicates that Sub-Saharan Africa currently has the highest number of women entrepreneurs. But then the same reports and others, we find out that the women representation in the high growth sectors of the economy, the businesses that are able to create a high mass of job creation, wealth creation, high impact sectors, you find that women's role there are very minimal. And this is because more increasingly, as we found out, because women are have very little representation in innovation processes. So then recognizing the role of women in innovation, especially in the fast increasing fourth industrial revolution sector, we find that will be key to their economic empowerment and their social inclusion. And I'll explain this later. And which is currently at the center of the current sustainable development goals. So my study seeks to explore how we can build the capability of women entrepreneurs in transformative innovation within the fourth industrial revolution sector. And I'll take a qualitative approach. It will be based on comparative case study. I will capitalize on in-depth interviews with selected women firms. And also I'll interview innovation managers, institutional managers that deal with innovation in South Africa and in Nairobi, Kenya. So when we look at the challenges and barriers, what we are finding out are the challenges and barriers for women in transformative innovation actually accrue back to what we've just discussed with the previous speakers, where we are saying that women are challenged when it comes to innovation. So if we go back to where innovation comes from, where do innovation comes from? If you've had your classes and you've learned where innovation comes from, we find then it's easier for us to understand the barriers and challenges women face in this sector. For example, most of the transformative innovations are found to be disruptive in nature, technological in nature. They involve engineering and design, R&D processes. And to be honest, these are sectors where we predominantly find that they are predominantly male dominated. Secondly, women traditionally are marginalized, as has already been discussed, in STEM fields at the basic college level, and even later in STEM careers, we find that women are minimum. And so we also learn they start their businesses with fewer networks. And as we discuss more about innovation, especially within the transformative sector, we find that things to do with the networks, collaborations, interactions actually increase knowledge access and knowledge transfer. Then the third thing is the entrenched systems of norms, attitudes, and beliefs that relegate women to the lower ranks of power relations when it comes to innovation processes and even entrepreneurship. We find that, of course, women hardly, especially in the Africa context, women hardly own land and other resources they can use as collateral to get finance. And they also spend a lot of time and money on taking care of their families and their community. So yes, we find those will create barriers for women, especially. Moses, we move further. Yeah. So when we talk of gender and transformative innovation, what I'm clearly coming across, the issues coming up are transformative innovations actually hold increased, have potential for increased participation of women innovation. And this is because they drive towards green, clean, equitable, and sustainable production systems. We discuss things to do with social innovations, frugal innovation, user-led innovations. These are increasingly areas where you find a large number of, a higher representation of women. When we discuss issues to do with the NGO sector, the public sector, where innovation is slowly going into, then we see there is a potential for more women actually becoming visible in innovation processes. Again, we find that transformative processes are not gender neutral. Just as the same thing we've discussed and found that innovations are not gender neutral. This means that they have different impacts and influences on development based on the gender. Is it a man or is it a woman? Yet this has not been taken account in our current studies on innovation. Another thing about gender and transformative innovation is that transformative innovations can be gender transformative if they address the underlying causes of socially constructed norms, attitude, and power relations that I was discussing about and confirming as barriers to innovation. So gender analysis can lead to different insights that inform new innovation. For example, if you involve women in green energy cookers, you are able to come up with better designs that are more user-friendly, and you're able to commercialize them better because it's the people who use the most who are involved in their design. So things like farm tech, innovation, education, technologies actually have far-reaching consequences when we discuss gender inequality. When we go to women and the fourth industrial revolution sector, we find that just like in the developed country, even here in the developing countries, the fourth industrial revolution sector represents both opportunities and challenges for women. For example, if we discuss opportunities, areas of maternal health have improved tremendously through AI and big data. The use of drones to drop medicine, farm inputs in remote locations where women take care of their farms, and green technology. When you're talking of energy cookers, the Internet of Things has led to work-life balance for women, whereby through e-commerce and other portfolios, women can actually work from home and still be able to take care of their families. And EduTech has also led to more women accessing education, especially those who need to do their education from home. But again, the challenges that women are likely to face in this sector, more women likely to lose jobs. That is what studies are bringing up, that more women are likely to lose jobs due to mechanizations that are likely to happen in this sector, like in farm, in the retail sector, because they're usually the majority in those sectors. And then obviously, the lack of adequate skills are necessary for you to actually take advantage of opportunities that are likely to arise in this sector. So my analysis, I'm taking a national innovation systems approach where we don't look at just the capability at the farm level, but I'll be looking at capability development at the individual level, where I'll be looking at the human and social capital development for women entrepreneurs, their education and training, skills development, how they network, how they participate in business networks, business development activities, and even how they access knowledge compared to maybe to firms that are led by men. Then at the farm level, we'll be looking at the leadership and management styles of these women. Are they conducive to innovation? The internal support for innovation, the openness of the farm, how do they create knowledge? How does it transfer across the farm? The learning processes within, the knowledge creation transfer. We'll also be looking at absorptive capacity, the ability of the farm to actually absorb knowledge, assimilate it, and use it to its own commercial ends. And then also at the national level, we'll be discussing the institutional structures and social support frameworks that are accessible to these women entrepreneurs, the STI policies, technological infrastructure, and other externalities that we know are important for innovation. So what is also coming up, learning that could come from other areas where this has been done. The recommended policy directions could be finding it occurring in 4 spheres, whereby there's provision of conducive business environment for innovation, strong institutional social support frameworks. On the other side, we'll discuss gender promoting policies that include innovation partnerships, collaborations that include academia, the civil society, the private sector. And it's also becoming clear in these studies that the national innovation system and the triple helix system, when it comes to this sphere, is not enough. And there is need for us to move to the quadruple helix system because it includes other actors like the civil society, the NGOs, financial intermediaries, that if the conversation is put together across everyone, then it's easy for women, for gender inclusion when it comes to innovation. Then the other one is to co-identify, prototype, pilot, and develop innovative projects that can accelerate gender equality, provide technical advice, develop tools and methodologies that capture and share the women experiences in the transformative innovation sector. And finally, and this is a bit controversial, I'm not sure how it can be done, where we need to change the narrative on existing cultural norms, the attitude, belief system, and power relations, so that we allow more women to have time and resources for them to participate in innovation processes. So I think that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much.
Yes, any questions?
Yeah, thank you very much, Pamela, for that presentation. Moses, maybe you can keep up that last slide just for a minute. And if people have questions, I've tried to see in the chat. I see that there's a comment from Pauline Ngimwa, who is saying capacity building of researchers in terms of integrating gender better into the research is actually a key issue. And I tend to agree with her that maybe there's need for more of us to work more directly on this, also on the capacity building in that field. But I don't know, Pamela, what do you think? Is this something that you have come across as a problem, or do you think people?
Just repeat the question again.
So Pauline is asking if there's capacity building of researchers in the forms of in order to integrate gender better into the research.
Yes, that would. Yeah, that is true. What is coming up in the literature, that is very true, because if we have more women in the research, especially to do with gender and innovation, the sensitivity of these people to the research is going to have, it's going to remove us from the gender neutral perspectives of innovation to more gender sensitive perspectives. And basically that is what we are looking at, because this research is going to influence policy in these countries. So if more women are undertaking this, and it's like doing something that you know where it pinches, then I believe you're able to actually come up with better gender promoting policies that will include women in innovation processes.
Yeah, so actually your research is also concerned with doing pro-women research and not just pro-poor research, is that right?
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Susan was pointing to that in the chat, I think.
Yeah.
And then finally, Becky has been asking a question: is the solution an engendered innovation system or innovation for inclusion and transformative change? What would be your take on that one?
What's the question again, please?
Is the solution an engendered innovation system, or do you think it's more about innovation for inclusion and transformative change?
I think it's the first one, because what we are trying to say, basically, I'm moving this conversation from us discussing gender innovation to gender and transformative innovation. And what we've seen that transformative innovation actually holds more opportunities for women to become visible in innovation processes. So if we shape policies, if we promote gender inclusive policies that actually include women at each and every level of the capability, at individual level, discussing women farms, and at the national level, discussing what works for women and what does not work, then I believe this is what we are aiming for.
So making more room for actually dealing with women's, both their strategic and their practical gender needs might be another way of putting this. There's an old article by Caroline Moser that actually distinguished between these things.
Okay.
Which may be of interest, and we'll put out shortly a small overview of some of the research in this field. Okay, thank you very much. Are there, Becky, has there been any other questions here? There's one here. No, I think that's...
Yes, there are two.
Okay, maybe you can post them.
There is a question from Joseph. Entrepreneurial participation for innovative business startups seems to have gender parity, but declines with scale up. How can we bridge this gap in Africa? And then another one's just come in from Anne, essay. There is a need in building capacity of women in gender and innovation and work with higher education institutions locally in scaling it up. So there seems to be some questions around research and how gender and is an innovation are considered at the research level, and in terms of getting women in the research process, but also these questions around women and gender issues in business, entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and I think both are good streams, sort of, for the research agenda that we should help each other develop, right? Anne Kingiri, do you want to comment on any of these things?
Yes, Margaret, I think these are very key questions which are informing our next steps. I know Becky is going to talk about that, but I'm a bit excited about something which Pauline Gimwa is bringing up around engendering research process. And she mentions that engendering research questions has been a problem, you know, and capacity needs to be built around this. Perhaps we could hear something from her about how this can be done.
Very good. Pauline, do you want to come in?
Yeah, hi everyone.
Hi,
I asked
welcome.
this question because this is something that we've been struggling with. Where I work for an organization called the Partnership for African Social and Governance Research. And we work with researchers, we work with also policy actors. And the whole issue of how you engender your research questions become an issue. Yeah. So when we discovered that there is that capacity problem, we went out and developed a short course, a short module that teaches the researchers, first of all, creates the awareness of what it is to engender research process, starting with the research conceptualization and the research questions. And then we gave them the skills. Some of them do not understand what gender analysis is all about. So from that perspective, we've seen a bit of improvement because researchers no longer look at research the way we know. They look at it with the gender lens, and they integrate gender dimensions right from the conceptualization all the way to even the dissemination. I like the response that was given by, I think, Pamela, that the fact that women are doing research, they are becoming more sensitive, because she used the phrase that it is only the wearer of the shoes who knows where it pinches most. So women, when they are doing research and they are sensitized, then they will know how do we ensure that issues of gender, not just women issues, but issues of gender are integrated. So that is how we've gone about integrating gender, ensuring that our researchers are aware of that. But I just wanted to know what is happening elsewhere, and particularly within this network. I guess that is what I have to say on this. Thank you.
Thanks very much. No, I think, Pauline, that's great to hear. Maybe you can share a link to, if you have some materials you want to share, and it's certainly something we could consider in terms of making more effort in this field.
Maybe just quick to say that the module is available, and what we'll do, if there is interest, we could organize a way of going about it, and skilling your people.
Yes, please be in touch with us, and we'll send the link and send the link around, and we can try to talk more about that later. Okay, I think in order not to get completely away from the time schedule, we should actually now shift to the final presentation by Allende. So Allende, will you please get your slides up and give us your presentation? Thank you. It links well up, I hope and think, with the discussions about what should the network be doing in the future in this area.
Thank you for this privilege from AfricaLics. And I want to thank NigeriaLics too, because I can see them participating. So on behalf of NigeriaLics, I'm bringing greetings, just to say a little about what we are presently doing on gender and innovation in Africa, specifically in Nigeria. The next slide. I won't want to take more of our time again on the importance of this gender issue. The two presenters have mentioned it, and I must say that we are recognizing this issue in innovation now. And it is a great thing to do, at least, even for the sake of bringing innovation into a level that will bring results even in productivity. The next slide, just to mention concepts, gender concepts a little. And I just want to say that we have to look more deep into the definition of this gender concept. We have to look both biological and also look at the social cultural definition. And I love the first presenter. We have seen the reason why we should do the gender analysis, but I just want to add to it that there's a need we understand the gap. There's a need we understand the gap. There's a need we understand the condition of the actors in this innovation, and that will help us to be able to have a good policy formation or to guide the people in policy. And that makes us to look at the data. I like the conclusion on the micro and the micro. It's no longer a matter of farm alone. We start from the individual and we go down and go up even to the general level of the national. That will help us to be able to come out with indicators. I think we should give ourselves this challenge to move not alone onto STI indicators, but also to the gender indicators. I think we need to have that question, throw it to every one of us to start working on these indicators that can bring out gender concepts in innovation. The next slide. I just want to show few of the research done by AfricaLics members. And you can see people are working on innovation capability of women enterprise in informal setting, such by Adeosun and Shitu and Aju. And this research was able to show forth the issue of women operating in the informal sector, especially in the value chain, bringing attention to their productivity and welfare. So also women entrepreneur and innovation was done in Ghana by Egbetokun and Co. And this has also revealed the differences in innovation behavior between women and men farm, suggesting specifically to target enterprise policy to address these so-called gender gaps. The next one is also the one done by Omotosho and Co. on women asset ownership and technology innovation. This research has really reviewed the reason why there's innovation gap, adoption of innovation, especially among women. This is mainly due to the poor level of resources. So also, Otejere also look at enhancing innovation sustainability in startup and SMEs in Nigeria and also in Cameroon. This work was done by him and others, and he was able to review the gap in access to capital and training. Just I'm trying to say we need to look at the gap. We need to explore the gap so we'll be able to bring out the indicator that is needed. Looking at also the next one I want to review, done by Maruf, work on eco-innovation of female-led farms. He was able to review a need for formation of policy that will break the barrier in markets, the traditional barrier, and also that will also cause inclusion of women in carbon development. There's also another work, I think this one is currently on, trying to model risk, innovation, and gender. And I think, in fact, I'm waiting for the result of this work to see how we can model the gender into innovation, not only into climate risk, but that will be able to, because just, I like the question that is coming from others, in time of this indicator, what do we really want? And I think when we're able to model it, we'll be able to bring out the indicator, we'll be able to bring out what we can focus on that will bring results in innovation process research. This is just to mention a few because it was sent to me in a few minutes. I want to thank everyone that sent their work. And for those that cannot mention because of time, people are working. We only need to be more focused to be able to bring out ideas and that will bring results into the gender issue and innovation. I just want to mention that this data gathering, what are we really looking at? Just to also stimulate with the researchers, what are the questions we want to look? Is it only roles and responsibility? I want to say no, even though it's inclusive. Is it only about access and control? I want to say it's not limited to that. It's also go further, even onto factors that is affecting what is this access limitation? What is this gap? What is this role? We need to look at the cultural factor. We need to look at why are this equality existing? What are the social factors? What are the economic factors? What are the policy that we need to put in place that will cause the gender analysis to bring about meaningful results in productivity and innovation? I want to leave that to researchers as we think on this. I really want to stimulate us because I have a few minutes. And I will just mention this, even also as a matter of stimulating the researchers in Africa, in Nigeria, and globe, that we need to look at the way to plan to bring programs that will bring infrastructure into gender issue, that will improve the accessibility of women to productive resources, inputs, educational resources, rights, even resources in terms of natural resources. We need to facilitate cluster and association. I like what AfricaLics is doing, and I'm proud to see what they are helping us to do as Nigerians. You know, people are coming together, people we don't know, people we don't know what they do. We're coming together. So I think it's high time we also form this cluster production amidst women that will be able to bring results, and also to increase access to technology, link women to high value chain. And we need to understand the dynamics for this policy. And most especially, in order to have good research capability, we need to mentor youth. We need to mentor men. We need to mentor women that will work on this. I want to say thank you as I leave the room for other people to talk.
Thank you very much, Ayinde, for that inspiring talk. I think we've now had two very exciting presentations on more specific research that's either has been done or is in the process of being done. So like Pamela's presentation, and I'm sure that just the very fact that we are today together sharing experiences and information and so on will contribute to the development of the field, right? So fascinating stuff that you have been bringing up, Ayinde, from AfricaLics. In AfricaLics, we are currently revising our website, including the area for where we place information about materials that can be accessed by scholars. So there's a repository under development in terms of the field of gender and innovation. So I'm sure if you share with us all the information that you got through your network, and everybody else could do the same, then the Secretariat will be more than happy to place lists about this type of information, this type of research going on that website. I wonder, Susan, if you want to come in and comment on some of those presentations and the questions that have been raised. Because we are getting towards the end of this session. So before I give the floor to Rebecca to say a few words by way of conclusion about way forward, I would like to ask if you want to add something.
Oh, I'm very excited by the amount of research that's going on. I put something in the chat about that Nigeria list is very, very impressive. And it's interesting stuff. I think what we want to work on together is some frameworks that don't derive entirely from concepts from the global north, and therefore pick up the full range of issues that are out there. So this session was originally oriented around entrepreneurship, I know, and so that came out really strongly in both presentations, but there's a variety of other issues out there, both women as innovators in different ways that don't end up as a business, and other parts of the innovation system that affect women and how they live. But I'm excited about the stuff that I saw there. Thank you, both of you.
Yeah. No, I think the point about taking point of departure in the situation in the South, in the global South, in this case in Africa, is really very, very key. There's a lot of good stuff out there. And unfortunately, some of it doesn't make its way to internationally recognized journals and so on. And for that reason itself, it's actually made invisible. So we also have something to work on in that respect, making this research that's already out there more visible.
We're very interested in seeing it at Innovation and Development. I can speak as a journalist.
I think that was an open invitation to everybody for submitting to the journal called Innovation and Development. And on the AfricaLics website, you will find a list of journals that are actually closely linked to the Global X network. So you can think about submitting to some of those as well. Anne Kingiri, can I give the floor to you towards the very end to say thanks and so on? And then
I think so. Yeah, let's give this to Becky.
Yeah, so Becky, would you like to come in now?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear. Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so I've been given the unenviable task of trying to consolidate everything that's been discussed, which is no mean feat, because there's been some really interesting topics discussed, and we've touched on many different things. What's really interesting is we've talked about how the field of research and people's ideas have moved from thinking about women in research to broader definitions of gender and innovation, and suggesting that we move from the WID and WAD and GAD to GAI, G-A-I, gender and innovation. And then we've also talked about the relationship between gender and broader inclusion issues and how they fit together. We've talked about the fact that research is engendered and the need for research to focus on gender issues. And we've seen examples of that through today's presentations. But there's also something around the need for a broader research that is not just focused on the role of women in firms or businesses or their relationship with technology, but a gendered analysis for the whole innovation system and across the design, innovation, or production and use chain. So this is just the start of a set of discussions that we'd like to have, and we're glad to see they're already taking place in places like AfricaLics, so in some of our national hubs. We are reviewing the material that's on our website and trying to develop a compendium of research on gender and innovation. And so, as Margrethe said, please send us the materials that you have so that we can really flesh this compendium out. We're also revisiting what the research agenda in this area should look like, and this is the start of those discussions, this workshop, this seminar. We have had some, when AfricaLics first started, there was a recognition of the research gap in this area, and I think things have moved on, even in the 8 years since AfricaLics started. So this will be the start of a continuing discussion of what questions, what research should be ongoing, and maybe we should be considering a special issue in innovation and development to consider these issues. So I don't want to say any more than that now. Just to say, I think this has been a really good first start to hopefully some continuing discussions over the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Becky. And yeah, I mean, I hope that the board of editors of innovation and development will seriously consider that suggestion of a special issue, because that might be a good way of also getting more out there. I also think that just by means of collecting all this ongoing research and doing a more systematic review of this, I actually think we can contribute to the visibility, because not everything will make it into the a possible special issue of such a journal. So I think it's still very important that we can continue to collect the stuff that's going on out there and make it available for people. So hopefully a lot of this will be open access. I don't know, but it would be really good if it is, because of course accessibility is key as well. So with those few remarks, I can see Gregory is coming on, so that's really nice. Hi, Gregory, to see you as well. And I think that, Anne, maybe it's over to you to say words of thanks. And towards the end, we can maybe bring on the cameras and everybody can wave and say their good wishes for the upcoming festive seasons, as they say. Anne?
Yeah, thank you, Margaret. Thank you, everybody, because I know we are a bit behind time, because we are supposed to finish by 7 o'clock. Maybe just to say thank you to everybody, particularly the panelists. Susan, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Thank you, Pamela. Thank you, Professor Inde. Congratulations. Today you have become a professor. We've just been informed. You've received the title. Congratulations. And the board members who are participating, I have seen Amfogo, Ayinde. Susan also is the board member, is a board member of AfricaLics. So on behalf of the board members who are supporting us behind the scene, thank you so much. But more important, to the participants for your, joining us. Very useful comments which are going to inform our next steps, suggestions to come up with a special issue that is welcome. I know Susan is going to guide us in that, but also to urge Nigerians to pursue, something around, developing this research idea further. I'm sure there are people who are open to collaborating with you. Susan actually probably would be interested. So I would advise you to reach out to not just Susan, but also to the other people who participated today to see whether we can actually come up with something within AfricaLics and beyond AfricaLics. Thank you, Pauline, too. We are going to reach out to you to see what we can do together. So everybody, thank you. Put your cameras on. Magreda, I'm sure you want to see everybody.
I do, as always.
Yeah, so we take a picture.
Yeah.
So we wish you a Merry Christmas and a good New Year, better than 2020.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
and one where we can see each other in person, huh? Please.
Yeah.
I'm just taking, here's a picture. Yes. Very good. Thank you, everybody. Have a very good festive season and see you next year.